character women, you know, Kristen Wiig, I mean, all of them, you know, who are brilliant in their own right. But she was the first, I think, or certainly one of the first. You know, I think separate from her mammoth comedic skills, her intelligence and her heart. You know, she came at a time when that combination was rare and also welcomed. You know, we are much snarkier now. We are much more, you know, we tend to go for a harder edge and more sarcastic and more. She was hysterically funny, but also magnanimous and generous from her, you know, with her players, but also her own heart. You know, she brought that to her characters, and I think that, you know, the chambermaid, you know, the whatever she called that, you know, those were characters that endeared us to her, and I think that was her prevailing and pervasive quality that she brought to her work. I did pick the song I was going to sing. I love that song, but I had no idea they were going to insert those great sort of fashion-y stills of the time, which are so perfect. And I recognize those stills. I know where they come from. I know which shoots they come from and what we were doing at the time. But it was great. It was great. It was like, I was such a special, wonderful. I got a thrill seeing it again. I really did. That Bob Mackie jumpsuit. Oh, please. I love it. It's so great. Yeah, he dressed us for the whole show. And I'm for that last number for me as well. That's the jumpsuit. It was, yeah. And you know, it had no back, it was backless, and his construction, you know, because I've got boobs, his construction was so major, because there I am in a backless dress, a jumpsuit, doing all of this, you know, back bends and, you know, all this stuff. And the dress is just perfectly constructed, so the jumpsuit is perfectly so that it doesn't, you know, shift, nothing moves, it's all perfect. And he was a genius at construction. Amazing every week. And those outrageous costumes, you know, those crazy, you know, things that he designed for Carol, you know, and one after another after another. I mean, that's his, you know, that's amazing to be that prolific. That's incredible. Well, we certainly rehearsed, you know, but that emanated from Ernie Flatt, for the choreographer. That was really, conceptually, maybe he worked with Carol, I don't know. They certainly talked to me about it, but I was game to do anything, you know, and because I was a dancer, they utilized that and let me really dance a lot in it, you know, and work with the other dancers, and it was, you know, it was a joy. And there isn't that much rehearsal when you think about it. I mean, it's, you know, it's a weekly show. So you know, I can't remember how much we actually rehearsed, but at the most, you know, I mean, she's doing other things. She's got other things to rehearse. You know, I was able to rehearse, you know, maybe 5 hours, 6 hours a day for whatever, you know, on the number. But she has to come in and do it really quickly and learn those, you know, the complicated choreography at the end. And as you say, it was more of a dance number than she is used to really doing on the show. So it was, you know, brave and great. I met Don Adams. I didn't obviously get to work with him, which was a shame, but I met him, and he was, you know, very, very, you really don't know with him when he's kidding or serious. Even in some of the stuff he did with Carol, you know, you get it in a moment, but he's sly. He's got a sly, wonderful, you know, sense of humor. The first show that I did, 110 in the Shade, was a musical, and I had a bang-up musical number in the second act, like killer number. But the character was comedic. She was the town flirt, and she was funny, you know. So right away, my first show, I got an opportunity to be funny and realized that I felt comfortable doing comedy, you know. And then there was, you know, Cinderella was very serious, but then there was some funny stuff in the Disney movies that I did. But then right quickly after that, I did a movie that not a whole lot of people saw, but it was an incredible cast. It was called Harry and Walter Go to New York. It was Elliot Gould, James Caan, Diane Keaton, Michael Caine, Carol Kane, myself. It's just an amazing cast. And I had a hilarious, I played a kind of, it was around the early 1900s, and I played this sort of over-the-top, deadly serious diva opera singer, and it was funny. It was really funny. So I went back and forth between these sort of very comedic roles to very, very, very serious and sort of heartbroken roles. You know, it was interesting that I never found myself typecast, which was great. I really actually love doing both, and I love being able to go back and forth. You know, I did a very serious movie recently that is in the editing stage, and about a woman whose husband has early onset dementia and how it affects her and her family. And it was very heartbreaking to do. And I met the woman, and I spent a lot of time with her, and lots of tears. And then I just finished doing 2 episodes of Community with Martin Mull, which is, you know, as zany and broad and crazy as you can get. So, but it's great for me because then I'm not depleted in one area or the other, you know, to go back and forth is great. I loved that. And that was funny and serious. You know, I got to do both in the show. I adored doing that show, and I loved Mary, you know, and she had the last baby, and she was like, I can't do this, and I can't travel, I can't do this. It was too hard because she had 3 little girls, and she had to call it quits. But yeah, it was a great show to do. Great character. I think that dancing absolutely helped me be comfortable in physical comedy because a lot of actors are trained and they act from the head up, from the neck up. You know, they're not used to using their bodies. And because obviously dancing is all about the body, it was very easy for me to utilize my connection to my body in creating the characters and having them have a different physical sensibility. So yes, it was a tremendous help for me, dancing. And in comedy, you know, I think the broadest comedy I've done is a movie I did with Mel Brooks called Life Stinks. It was very broad, and you know, and Mel is very broad, and his, you know, and I was scared because I hadn't done anything that broad. But again, because of the dancing, I was able to throw myself into it and get and you know, embody the kind of comedy that his style requires. So yes, dancing helped tremendously. Also, I was trained at the Actors Studio. I studied with Lee Strasberg in New York for, you know, he was my teacher for 10 years. And one of the exercises that we did was called an animal exercise. But it sounds funny and it looks funny, but you go to the zoo and you pick an animal and you study the animal's characteristics and you bring it to class, and then you imbue it in a character. And how it changes that character is amazing. It's very profound. So having that connection with physicality takes you the distance, especially in comedy, you know. I think that Carol's influence with women comedians is enormous. You know, you see it all the time on Saturday Night Live with some of the great women. You know, their lack of self-consciousness, they're willing to, you know, jump in, make faces, be physical, pratfalls, etc., you know, all of it, have extreme characterizations. This is something Carol did every week, you know? So I think she's had, you know, she gave license to all of these women who now are, you know, doing their brilliant work, you know? What was great about it was both ensemble work and obviously Carol's show, but it was also very ensemble heavy in that she was so generous to her colleagues and gave them incredible material to do and hysterically funny opportunities. And, you know, then I know Vicki went on to do her show, and, you know, they all had blossoming careers coming out of that show, you know. And I think it's because she created a sort of almost summer stock feeling to, let's put on a show. And everybody, would gather together, and it's very sort of SNL, that's how they kind of do it. They sit in a room and they, throw out ideas for skits, and they, so yeah. Oh, I think there definitely was room for improvisation. I mean, I wasn't in any of the skits, sadly, but watching them, there was, you could see, and you could see that they were having such a good time. They had a special last night on television, and I know this won't be, this will be at a, in a different time frame, but the SNL 40th anniversary special, and one of the highlights of the special was when they cracked each other up. They did a montage of cracking each other up, and it makes the audience feel such a part of when that happens. And they allowed for that, they encouraged it, and great improvisation came out of it. I went to see Wicked on Broadway with Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, and the night that I was there, there's a very big number that Kristen does on her own, and a big bed comes out behind her on the stage, and then she sings a song related to whatever's going on in the action. The bed didn't come. The bed didn't come. The bed, she's looking, the bed's not coming. And she was hysterical. She was just hysterical because she's a veteran. She knows how to, the audience got what was happening. She included them in the sort of drama. And it was, it was amazing. She pulled it off, brilliantly. So I think that I remember being on stage, I did Gone with the Wind when I was 21 or something, 2, whatever. I played Scarlett O'Hara in the musical version of Gone with the Wind at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, and then in San Francisco. And we had a real horse. We had the Burning of Atlanta. We had a real horse on stage. And this horse came out, and I'm Scarlett, and I'm singing this really serious song about tomorrow, and the audience starts laughing, like really laughing. And I had no idea. And I sort of looked around, and of course the horse was doing his business. He was busy. He had to. So, there we are. And I just, it was over for that night. We were just, it was pointless. So we tried valiantly to go on, but, done. That was done that night. Those things happen. I probably finished the song, I acknowledged it. How could you not? I mean, I acknowledged it to the audience, we laughed, and then took a breath and went on with, the Burning of Atlanta. When I went in to meet Blake Edwards for Victor Victoria, I didn't really know anything about the part, and we just spent 20 minutes kind of talking about our Cinderella histories because of Julie doing it and then me doing it. And we had just such a great time and such a great talk and had so much fun. And then he offered me this role without my even reading the script, which was amazing, amazing. And then I came back and I read it, and she was not blonde, and she didn't have an accent, and there was no musical number. And I called him the next day in London, and I couldn't get to him because he had gone to London, and I spoke to his producer, and I said, I have all these ideas about this character, I'd love to make her the sort of quintessential chorus girl at the time, and make her blonde, and maybe she grew up in New York and Lower East Side and has this, and he sent his hairdresser and makeup people from London, and we kind of created this character in my bedroom, which was both exciting and scary, because I thought, I'm going to fly to London, do the makeup test, and he's going to fire me because he's got, because I pretty much changed this character, but he didn't. Ugh, what a blessing. Yeah, it was amazing. And I was sitting next to him in dailies one day because he required that all the actors, all the painters, all the crew come to dailies because he likes to see where the real laughs are. So everybody comes to dailies, and I was sitting next to him, and one day we were just sitting there, and he said, "Do you still sing?" And I said, "I do." And he said, "Do you still dance?" And I said, "I do." And he said, "I want to see Norma in a musical number." And I went, "Great." And he flew Henry Mancini and Leslie Bricusse over from America, and they created this killer number, just killer number. And, There you go. A lot of that movie was improvised. Not everybody. Julie doesn't like to improvise, so she doesn't. But I'm okay with it. I'm comfortable. And when he found out that I was comfortable, he would consistently let the camera roll and expected me to come up with something. But that whole thing with Julie, when she's breaking into the room, and I say, lock the door. You know, I don't know if you're that familiar with the thing. Anyway, all of that was from improvised. And the stuff on the train and, yeah, lots of stuff. I know everybody says the Golden Globes, but for me it was the Oscars. That was pretty damn exciting. I mean, it was, thrilling, just thrilling. And my son was with me, which was amazing. He was 14, I think, or something like that at the time, and maybe 12. It was just, so exciting, so exciting. And when I didn't get it, the initial disappointment is real. But then I looked in front of me, and it was Sydney Pollack and Dustin Hoffman, and they had lost. And, whoever it was, and I thought, okay, all right, this isn't so bad. It was one of the most exciting nights, certainly professionally of my life. It's a pretty great crowd. Yeah, it's a club that you are so proud to be a part of. There are so many people that you're meeting. Everywhere you look is some major star or major director. It's so exciting and overwhelming. And I'll tell you, the other award show that was thrilling to me was because I did not expect to win. I mean, truly, I did not. I felt like I was I can't remember the name of it, but it's the horse that doesn't, I just did not expect to win. And it was the Golden Globes, and it was for a mini-series I did called 79 Park Avenue. And, it was leading actress in the mini-series category. And I just was not prepared. I had nothing prepared, no speech, nothing. And I won. And it was so shocking to me. I mean, I was so speechless, I think I managed to speak, but that was also an incredible evening. I've had other Golden Globe nominations since, but that, I think because it was so unexpected. I just did not expect it. It was so exciting. A lot of people say, and I think it was true for me as well, that you're having an out-of-body experience. You're really not present. It's so overwhelmingly exciting. You somehow manage to get through it, but you don't remember how you did it or what you said, or, I see it's on, somebody sent me, it's probably on YouTube or something, me walking from the wings to get and I see how shocked, I wasn't unprepared, but of course ecstatic, at winning it. So I love them. I mean, I get a little bit, it gets a little bit much at this time, you're sort of, okay, I can't take another award show that I'm not on, but, but we have we watch the Golden Globes and we watch the Grammys and of course the Oscars and, and it's fun. And we have friends and we have, it's fun. The Muppet Show, another variety show of sorts. Yeah, I mean, it really was a variety show in a way. Fabulous experience. They shot it in London. So I went to London and it's very first class all the way. So they put you in a beautiful, the Connaught, beautiful hotel, and it was a lot of rehearsal. We had a week to 10 days of rehearsal because it's involved because of the puppets, the Muppets. But I had seen when I was a little girl, young girl, I had seen Lily, a movie with Leslie Caron, and I think I must have seen it 7 times. She falls in love with a puppet. And it was eventually made into a musical on Broadway called Carnival. But Lily, it was called Lily, was the original movie. And it had such a strong imprint on me, that movie, that when I went to work with the Muppets, I felt like her. I felt like Lily. I felt like Leslie Caron. And it was, I didn't feel uncomfortable or awkward talking and singing to him. None of it. It felt very natural to me. And I had, I think it was because I had grown up with that sort of picture in my mind. We'd rehearsed the dancing like musical, theater. We really rehearsed, and it was all very, very, very professionally produced and choreographed. It was a wonderful experience. They had two Muppet pickles that were Leslie, what was it? How did they do it? It was like, three, Leslie and Warren or something, they did a takeoff on my name. And, it was and that was the comic relief of the show. And then there were some other comic bits, and they were funny. And, it was a variety show. That's what it was. I think like a lot of people, the Gone with the Wind sketch, that always stands out in my mind as being beyond hilarious, just hysterical. But I always loved her, the initial interaction with the audience that she did. She was so comfortable. It appeared that she was so comfortable and so connected to the people and funny. And that was obviously improvised, I was always struck by how beautifully she did that, and then her singing, some of the serious songs that she sang, I was, really, she was, they were touching and beautiful. So I guess if I had to wrap it up, though, I would have to say the Gone with the Wind sketch. It's interesting. I went back and I did a Broadway show, which was all Johnny Mercer's music from the 20s to the 60s, phenomenal, called Dream. And it was about 15 years ago, 16 years ago. And I was so struck by how the young dancers because it was all music, no dialogue, how the young dancers and singers were as trained as we were in that time. They all sang, they all danced, they all acted. You were expected to be excellent at all of it. So, when I did Carol's show, I had been singing and dancing for years and years and years. And my mom was a singer. My mother I have a picture in my bedroom of my mother in front of the Copacabana, where she was the lead young torch singer. And on the awning, it says Manhattan's newest dream girl. And that was my mother. My mother sang all the time in the house, all the time. And so I think, truthfully, I was very impacted in a subconscious, unconscious way with that. Because when I saw recently the Carol Burnett show and I saw that number that I did, I thought, where did that come from? Where did that styling come from? It came from my mom. I'm sure of it. Because I was so sort of, it was very nightclubby and kind of sultry and, had that sort of sexy thing going on, and that was my mother. I think for me, because I was ensconced in musical theater at the time, musical movies, I never thought of, having my own show, or that was not my trajectory. I think I was more of a more interested in acting, combining the music and the dance with acting. But I think because she was such a formidable, she paved the way for women to be considered at the helm and running their own show and their own, she instilled a kind of confidence just peripherally being around her that I could in fact pursue my own dreams, I've talked to a lot of my friends who are in the business about why musical movies went away, why variety shows went away. And I think, Rob Marshall, who is a friend, was so brilliant at bringing back the possibility of more of this, is because he brought such a modern sensibility to Chicago and utilized the current cinematic sensibility, which, so it's not proscenium, you're not just looking at a static shot and having all the action within the shot. The camera is doing a lot of that for you and with you. I you know, I think it's a we still have to be willing to take that trip into a kind of fantasy make believe, and I think that because of the advent of the kinds of the internet and television and the brilliant television that we have available to us now, it's difficult to get people to want, especially young people, to want to see, and that's where the advertising dollars are, you know. So it's all, you know, it's all connected, you know, to get them to sit still and see that make believe on television in that way. You know, it's the comedy that the younger people watch today is fast cut and edited in such a way. You know, it's very different, and I think it's, you know, I think the audience would be much older, possibly. You know, I hope I'm not, you know, like, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that one day somebody figures out how to bring that back. It would be great, but I don't know.
I wish I were good with words, Selma, because if I were, I could tell you what this evening has meant to me.
Oh, thank you, Morton. I had a swell time.
I don't know who the poet was. I don't know who the poet was, Selma, but what he said sums up my feelings about these last few hours.
What?
The night was made of promises of evenings yet to be, of times to come when quiet bliss will envelop you and me.
Why, Morton, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard.
It meant every word. May I come in?
Not tonight. It's a little late.
Tomorrow, then?
Well, sure, yes. Tomorrow would be fine. How about here? Dinner. I'll fix you my specialty, fried chicken.
I'd like that. I'd like that a lot.
7:30?
Oui, à 7h30.
Good night, Morton.
Good night, Selma.
I wish I were good with words, Pamela. If I were, I could tell you what a lovely evening I've had.
I had a wonderful time too, Reginald.
I don't know who the poet was. I don't know who the poet was, Pamela, but what he said sums up my feelings.